Susie, get us the hell out of here!
Stand by, Zola. The guidance is out. I need a minute to recalibrate.
What happens when you get the crew who did Warhammer Vermintide, but they used Warhammer 40k instead of Warhammer Fantasy? A fantasy world which has now been killed off and replaced with the Age of Sigmar. Well, you get a better version of Vermintide because it's 40k. Yeah, I said it.
Nah, yo, hold my poodle. Hold my poodle. Hey, yo, what's up? Y'all got a problem?
But also, you get a better version of a horde-based shooter, which at least in my opinion is up there with Left 4 Dead. Now, before I get into the review in general, two things to note. One, I picked up my wife's cold flu virusy thingy, so that's why I might sound a bit weird. Secondly, yes, a lot of this gameplay was caught during the beta, a beta which ends one day before the game launches, and it's also not really a beta as you can play all classes, your progress carries over, and 90% of the missions available are in the beta. So with that being said though as well, I won't be hammering on hard about any bugs like crashes or anything like that, as it's only fair that if I play something that is a beta, then I have to have a bit of give and take. Warhammer Darktide is the latest release from Fat Shark, the team behind Warhammer Vermintide and Vermintide 2, which is a 4-player cooperative horde shooter similar to that of Left 4 Dead, Back 4 Blood, or, well, the Vermintide series. However, unlike previous horde-based shooters, I at least personally thought that Darktide got off to a better start, because 1, I am a 40k fan, and 2, you can make your own character. Yeah, it's something small, but it's something that personally worked for me. Just with most, if not all, 40k or Warhammer games in general, you're treated to a sweet cutscene that sets the game's overall dark theme and setting to it, which works great for 40k fans, but also for people who don't know the lore, and helps give a general setting of the universe for Warhammer 40k. From there, we create our own character, and there are 4 class options available. Now, Darktide has us play as the Imperial Guard, or also known as now the Astra Militarum, and that's the only time I'll refer to them as that in this video. If you don't know what the Imperial Guard is, they're a human army of the Imperial of Man, serving the Emperor just like the Space Marines, the Sisters of Battle, the Custodes, but the Imperial Guard are just plain humans. Where Space Marines are basically mini-gods themselves, the Imperial Guard is the equivalent of Peter in Deadpool 2, a plain normal Joe of a person.
Any powers you want to tell us about? Any,
No, I don't have one. I just saw the ad.
But imagine having a near-endless supply of them as well, and are also known for having the best artillery in the tabletop game. Anyways, back to Darktide. We get to create our own characters and choose a class. We've got the Veteran Sharpshooter, which is basically a traditional Imperial Guard. We've got the Preacher Zealot, which can use flamethrowers and is a close-range fighter. We've got the Psycho or the Librarian, which is basically the Fire Mage from Vermintide that has high damage output but is very squishy. You can use magic, but if you use too much magic, you'll die, and, you know, it's basically the same as the Flame Magician from Vermintide. And then there's the Ogryn, which is basically a giant human ogre, and that's a tank style of class.
Oh, hello there!
Now, I was playing this with a couple of mates, and we wanted each of us to have a different class, and seeing as, for me, Imperial Guards are known for just sitting back and shooting, I picked the Veteran Sharpshooter class. You'll then get to pick some personalization items like eye color and beard and voice and tattoos, but there's also things for hardcore fans like what planet your character is from and what their backstory is and why they're a prisoner. Now, the start of the game has our character in a prison cell on our way to be executed, and we get to choose why we were caught. And basically that has nothing to do with the game, it just changes the color of our prison garbs. But the prologue teaches us how to shoot, how to use class-based abilities, and it shows off how damn good looking this game is. But what is the game? What's the story? Well, there is a story here, sure, but if you're looking for a Warhammer game with a proper story, go check out Space Marine or maybe the Total Warhammer series. But we escape our prison cell, assist the Imperial Guard, and escape a doomed ship. From that, we basically join the Inquisition, but chaos has infested itself on a planet, and it's up to you and your friends to basically complete simple and repetitive objectives, clearing out hordes of enemies. Now, that's not a knock against the game, that's just how these games are set up and how they play, and it's exactly like how things like Left 4 Dead and Back 4 Blood play because they're horde-based shooters. Also worth noting, you're not locked into playing as one character, you can create 5 different operators, so if you've found that the Veteran wasn't really for you and you want to try something else, you can, like me, try out the Psyker, and then, yeah, you can easily just flip back to your original character. But what's the gameplay like?
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it!
Well, besides the standard horde-based style mechanics, the shooting feels really solid, the melee and attention to detail in the melee combat, and sound design is top tier. Each character has 2 weapons, an ability, and then a buff, and depending on what class you pick determines on what weapons you can use. Now, there are universal weapons available like the traditional lasgun, but then there's specific special class weapons only. For example, the Imperial Guard can use a plasma gun, where the Zealot Preacher can use a flamethrower. Gameplay though, the damn game is solid fun. After playing Back 4 Blood, I was a bit concerned that we'd get another game that felt a little half-baked, but Darktide had me glued to it and did what all Warhammer games should. Have you go to the Games Workshop website or to your local board game store, buy some models and then hide them in the house from your wife, which is something I totally didn't do, Mrs. Dudi. Enemy-wise, being a horde shooter, you've got the standard cannon fodder enemy hordes, then slightly buffed version that can take a bit more damage, and then as you'd expect you get special enemy variants like pox hounds, which are chaos hounds that pounce on you, pinning you down, and then you need an ally to knock them off from you. From there you've also got boss enemies like the demons of Nurgle, and yeah, I'll get to that, and then there's also waves of close range enemies, and all that sort of stuff really. Now, unlike Left 4 Dead, we've also got ranged enemies like the cultists with lasguns, basically making them evil Imperial Guards. Then there's snipers that blend into the environment really well and deal insane amounts of damage. And then there's trappers, there's asshole grenade throwers, there's loads of different special enemy variants here. But the graphics, sound design, and attention to detail that Fat Shark have done in Darktide is fantastic for lack of a better word. For starters, there is health like you'd expect, which can be refilled using portable med stations or by using an actual traditional med station, which acts as like a little buffer sort of rest pseudo area before continuing off against the horde. But then there's also shields, which they call Toughness in this game. Now this alone made me go, okay Fat Shark, you have my undivided attention.
Well, gentlemen, you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
Secondly, when you're using melee weapons against the horde for more heavily infected devotees of Nurgle, if you will, you'll actually see maggots come out of them, which is awesome and also all kinds of gross. Quickly going back to Toughness, this is your shield system in the game, and obviously it takes the brunt of your attacks before you start to lose health. Now, your Toughness will recharge over time, where your health will only restore if you use a med pack or use a med station. But Toughness only recharges when you're in close proximity to your squad, which changes the game's core gameplay. Now, when playing Left 4 Dead or Back 4 Blood, which are basically the same game, I can't count how many times I've had a rogue player from the group run off and steal all the weapons, all the ammo, and all the health drops. Where here in Darktide though, if they run off and the squad either doesn't catch up to them or they just don't give a shit, they're on their own and their Toughness won't regenerate. Now, it is a pretty cool system if you ask me, and it reminded me of playing 40k as a kid, where certain members of your squad couldn't actually be more than 2 inches away from each other. The lasgun in this game, which is described as a flashlight in the tabletop community, when playing on harder difficulty, it really does feel like you're shooting enemies with a flashlight sometimes, and these guns too are as accurate as a stormtrooper when firing from the hip, which is something that Star Wars games need to, remember and learn themselves. Now, it's worth noting too that on harder difficulties the game can be obviously quite hard, and chatting to a giant Warhammer fan about this, he reminded me, and let it be known I'm an idiot, but we're playing as Imperial Guards. We're just regular humans really. And something as small as this answered a lot of my questions about this game. Like I said, I wish we went up against Plague Marines, or what about some more Demons of Nurgle, and on the tabletop 1 Plague Marine against 4 Imperial Guards, that's really not going to go down too well. Outside of combat, you'll be in a bit of a Destiny hub world on the Inquisitor ship the Morningstar, where you can purchase new weapons, you can purchase new cosmetics like clothing, you can change your character's facial features like the tattoos and the hairs and the scars, you can accept contracts, which are basically like bounties from Destiny 2. It's basically just a really good looking hub world where you and your mates can party up and then set out to do missions. But something that I at least hope we get in future is more locations, more classes, and more demons. The game itself takes place on one planet, and while the environments look fantastic with the great lighting and atmosphere, I wish we got some missions in different areas. If we were outside, we could see, say, iconic Imperial Guard tanks in use, or something that looked cool on a scale and war and all that sort of stuff. Now, we see NPC Imperial Guards and tanks at the start of some missions, but they don't really do anything. Now, while we've got 4 classes to choose from, it could be cool that if we got some more classes. Like the Kachkan Jungle Fighters would be a great class to look into, or maybe a Vindikar Assassin could also be kinda cool. I don't think we'll get anything close to a Space Marine, just because a Space Marine in the world of Darktide would be like racing a Formula 1 car with an electric scooter. My only other gripe is kind of a big one, but it's also kind of a personal one, and it's by using Chaos, again, and Nurgle, again.
You got a fucking problem, bro?
Now, personally, Nurgle is my least favourite Chaos God, but I know some people love them, and hey, there's no stress there, but I think it could have been really cool is to have multiple Chaos Gods and their lesser demons, and work with the special enemies in the game. Have Nurgle as tank-like enemies. Tzeentch can be like glass cannon enemies that deal loads of magic damage, but they can be taken out fairly quickly. Khorne is just simple, don't get fucking close to them, where Slaanesh could be something like creative, like if you use the Witch from Left 4 Dead, but rather than crying out, it tries to seduce you or tempt you before pouncing on you. What we could have also used is maybe different gods for different missions, and changing difficulty could randomize what Chaos God owns that area, if you will. Or if it is Chaos Undivided, then God knows what you're going up against. Now, while this is flat stupid, I know, bear with me, but allied races and classes to play with. Now yes, no one gets along in the Warhammer universe unless you love the Emperor, but seeing a Tau Fire Warrior partner up with the Imperial Guard when facing off against Chaos, to me, is not a far stretch, but again, I know it is flat fucking stupid. But I've been really enjoying Darktide, and it's coming to Game Pass too, so there's no real reason why you shouldn't try this out. As a Warhammer fan, this might be the greatest 40k game we've had since Space Marine. Sure, it doesn't have a compelling story, but playing a horde shooter like Back 4 Blood or Left 4 Dead, or like Darktide, for its story is like going for a run because you enjoy it. You're not fooling anybody. Playing this once with 2 massive Warhammer fans, you lads know who you are, got me back involved with 40k when my mates in Melbourne didn't want to waste $4,000 on a single piece of plastic, but I can't blame them either. Darktide is fun, it's gory, and it's visually stunning, but also casual enough for you and your mates to just sit back, have a couple of beers and laugh as you play. Or if you're playing with a group of 40k mates, turn the difficulty up and serve the Emperor. Warhammer Darktide is available now.
No superpowers at all.
I have both type 1 and 2 diabetes.